On a frozen Montana night, a police officer thought he was stopping for a wounded stray. But what he found trembling in the snow wasn't just a dog. It was a German Shepherd mother carrying a secret powerful enough to shake the entire state. A laser-coated mark on her skin, a heartbeat count no dog should ever have. And a government agent arriving far too quickly to be a coincidence. What happened next would test loyalty, courage, and the limits of compassion, because some lives were never meant to be found. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. And if you believe every creature deserves a chance at freedom, hit like, share this story, and subscribe for more miracles in the snow. Snow drifted across the Montana highway like pale dust from another world, swallowing the horizon in white silence. Officer Daniel Brooks, a 38-year-old patrolman with a square jaw, broad shoulders, and the tired eyes of a man who had lived through more storms than he cared to admit, drove slowly through the blizzard. His dark brown hair, cropped short, peeked from under his hat. A faint stubble shadowed his cheeks. He rarely shaved on night shifts anymore. A quiet, heavy loneliness had shaped his temperament after losing his young daughter 5 years earlier, leaving him cautious, observant, and unusually gentle with anything fragile. As he rounded a bend, his headlights cut through a swirl of snowflakes, and Daniel felt his breath catch. A shape trembled near the guardrail, hunched low as if trying to disappear into the snow itself. Instinct tightened Daniel's grip on the wheel. He braked, stepped out into the biting wind, and approached slowly. What he found wasn't a person, but a German Shepherd, female, young but exhausted, perhaps 4 years old, with a sable coat now soaked and clumped from freezing water. Her ribs showed under the thin fur, and her breathing came in ragged, frightened bursts. Her ears, once proud, drooped flat against her skull. The moment she saw Daniel, she lowered herself further, tail tucked, body trembling with a fear that didn't come from the cold alone. Daniel knelt, his breath fogging in the icy air. "Hey there, sweetheart. Easy." His voice softened, a tone that surfaced only when facing vulnerability. The dog shifted, revealing a massively swollen belly. Daniel frowned. She wasn't just pregnant. She was overdue, dangerously so. As he reached for her, the dog tried to crawl backward into a drainage pipe, a desperate instinct to hide, but she was too weak. Daniel slipped out of his thick patrol jacket and draped it gently over her shivering frame. When he lifted her, his fingers brushed against the short fur along her neck and struck something unusual, a laser-burned marking on the skin, faint but readable, even through frost. E9 to 47B, restricted biounit. Daniel froze. His stomach dropped in an instant. He had seen markings like this only once, during a briefing about illegal genetic projects the government denied existed. If this dog carried such a mark, she wasn't just lost. She was a fugitive from something far darker than a storm. But she whimpered again, a soft plea, and Daniel's instincts overpowered his fear. He carried her to the patrol car and wrapped her securely. "You're safe now," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if it was true. He drove through the storm until he reached a small veterinary clinic on the edge of town. The clinic run by Dr. Emily Carter, his closest friend since academy days. Emily, 36, petite but sharp-eyed, with copper-brown hair tied in a messy bun, had the warm confidence of someone who had stitched up every stray within 50 miles. Her freckles dotted her cheeks like winter constellations, and her voice always carried a mixture of authority and kindness. When Daniel burst in carrying the trembling shepherd, Emily's face tightened with alarm. "She's freezing," Emily said, ushering Daniel inside. "Put her on the table." As Emily toweled the dog dry and examined her belly, her brows drew together. "This isn't normal pregnancy swelling. It's too extreme." She wheeled over the ultrasound machine, gelled the probe, and pressed it gently against the swollen abdomen. The screen blinked, then filled with tiny flickering shadows, moving shapes, pulsing beats. Emily's jaw fell open. "Daniel," her voice cracked. This can't be real." Daniel stepped closer. The screen looked impossibly crowded. "How many?" he asked. Emily swallowed, her expression pale with disbelief. 47. No, Daniel, she's carrying 50. Daniel felt the room tilt. 50 puppies. No dog could survive that. No dog could create that. That marking on her neck, the E9 project, everything suddenly aligned into a terrifying truth. "She's going to die if we don't act fast," Emily whispered. But before Daniel could answer, headlights sliced across the clinic wall, bright, deliberate, far too quiet to belong to a civilian car. A single, sleek black vehicle rolled into the snow-covered lot. Someone stepped out. A tall man with a long dark coat, broad shoulders, and graying temples. His face was handsome in a stern, weathered way, the kind of face carved by duty rather than age. His eyes, cold steel blue, carried a sorrow that suggested he had followed too many orders he wished he hadn't. This was Agent Warren Hale, a federal field operative, rumored to be the last man tied to the E9 program. Emily whispered, "Daniel, who is that?" Daniel's pulse hammered. Hale walked toward the clinic door with a slow, heavy purpose, as if bracing himself for something he didn't want to do. Daniel stepped forward instinctively, positioning himself between the dog and the approaching silhouette. Hale stopped at the door, the storm swirling behind him like a curtain from another world. His gaze met Daniel's, emotionless but undeniably tired. And in that moment, Daniel understood. Hale hadn't come to ask. He had come to retrieve. The chapter ends with Hale's shadow crossing the threshold, bringing with it the weight of secrets long buried beneath ice and fear. The wind outside the clinic screamed against the glass as if the storm itself were trying to force its way in. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered weakly above Agent Warren Hale, whose tall frame filled the doorway with equal parts authority and quiet conflict. Warren, now in his mid-40s, stood with the rigid posture of a man shaped by years in government service. Broad shoulders pressed beneath a long charcoal trench coat, silver at his temples hinting at sleepless nights rather than age. His jawline was sharp, almost gaunt, and a thin line of stubble suggested that duty often outweighed self-care. He carried an air of exhaustion, not physical but moral, as if every decision he had ever made in service of the nation had carved another hollow behind his steel blue eyes. He stared at Sierra, the trembling German shepherd on the examination table, and something in him shifted, an emotion too quick to name, but strong enough that even Daniel noticed it. "This animal," Hale began, voice low, steady, "is registered under Program E9. I have orders to retrieve her immediately." His tone was firm but not cruel. It carried the weight of someone who had delivered orders he didn't believe in for far too long. Dr. Emily Carter, small but fierce, stepped closer to the dog, protective instincts igniting across her freckled face. "She's hemorrhaging," she snapped, brushing a stray lock of copper hair behind her ear. "She won't survive a transfer. You can't treat her like an object. She's alive." Hale turned to Emily, his gaze strangely gentle for a man who had kicked down doors and confiscated living experiments. "Doctor, I understand your concern, but this is not a typical case." He hesitated, something rare for a man trained to obey without question. "There are implications." Daniel stepped between them, his broad frame acting as an instinctive shield. His brown eyes, usually calm, sparked with something closer to defiance. "Implications or not, you're looking at a mother on the edge of death," he said. "What exactly do you intend to do with her?" Hale exhaled deeply, his breath visibly trembling in the cold air. "I don't know," he admitted, surprising even himself. "The people above me, they're not concerned with her suffering. They want what she carries." Emily's voice shook with controlled anger. 50 fetuses, 50 lives. You're telling me some committee decided they belonged to them?" Hale lowered his gaze. He didn't answer because the truth was worse than anything they imagined. Sierra let out a low, pitiful whine, her golden eyes flicking between the humans. Fear, plea, trust, and instinct all tangled inside her. The dog was exhausted, her breathing shallow, her paws trembling uncontrollably on the cold metal table. Emily reached out and stroked the back of Sierra's head, whispering soft reassurance. Sierra pressed into her touch, clinging to the only comfort she had, left. Daniel glanced at the blood matting Sierra's fur. "If you take her," he said, voice stiff with emotion, "she won't survive the drive, and you know that." Hale's silence was admission. He knew. He had seen too many specimens break before reaching their destination. He had carried that guilt for years, each failure another invisible scar. Before anyone could say more, the lights overhead flickered violently. A loud thump echoed from the side of the building, then another. The power cut out, plunging the clinic into darkness as the blizzard roared louder than ever. Emily gasped. "Not now! Daniel, we're in the middle of a treatment!" Hale instinctively reached for the small flashlight on his belt. Its beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the room in harsh white light. But something was wrong. The table where Sierra had lain was empty. "No," Emily whispered. No, she's too weak to move." But Sierra's instinct as a mother was stronger than pain. In the brief seconds of darkness, she had slipped off the table, dragged herself across the floor, and squeezed through the cracked door to the snowy alley behind the clinic. A thin trail of blood marked her escape. Hale shone the light toward the back exit and swore under his breath, a rare fracture in his usually controlled demeanor. "She won't survive out there," he muttered, not as an agent, but as a man who had seen enough dying creatures to recognize desperation. Daniel didn't hesitate. He was already grabbing his coat. "Then we have to go." Emily followed, pulling her hood up, her breath shaking from both cold and fear for the animal she'd just promised to save. Hale stood frozen for half a heartbeat, torn between duty and something deeper. Then he moved, his long strides echoing down the hallway. "I'm coming with you," he said. Daniel shot him a wary look. Hale added, "Not to retrieve her, to keep her alive." And so, the chase began. 3 figures plunged into the white chaos, an officer burdened by loss, a veterinarian driven by compassion, and an agent haunted by orders he never wanted to follow, each running into the blizzard for reasons stitched from guilt, duty, and fragile hope. Ahead of them, Sierra's bloody paw prints led toward the vast, icy mouth of Glacier Pine Forest, disappearing into the dark like a fading heartbeat. The storm swallowed them all. The forest of Glacier Pine swallowed all light the moment Daniel, Emily, and Hale stepped into it. The trees stood like towering black monuments, their snow-laden branches bending under the weight of the storm, and the wind lanced across the skin like icy blades. Officer Daniel Brooks, hardened but trembling with worry, pressed forward through knee-deep snow, every step fueled by a fierce determination that surprised even himself. His broad body shivered not from cold, but from fear. The kind of fear that came when something living depended entirely on him. Memories of his daughter, her small hand, her laugh, kept flashing in the back of his mind, tightening his chest, pushing him farther into the dark. Dr. Emily Carter, though smaller and slighter, kept up beside him. Her copper-brown hair had come loose in the storm, strands whipping across her freckled cheeks. Emily's heart hammered violently. She wasn't built for running through blizzards, but compassion had always made her stronger than muscle ever could. She held the medical kit tight against her chest, knuckles pale, mind running through all the emergencies she knew, and how few applied to a genetically altered dog giving birth in the wild. Every sound, from snapping branches to distant howls, made fear coil deeper in her stomach. But she couldn't stop. Not when Sierra was out here alone. Behind them, Agent Warren Hale pushed through the snow with a grim intensity. Snow clung to his long, dark coat, turning him into a shifting silhouette between the trees. His breath came in sharp bursts, fogging in the frozen air. Hale was not a man easily shaken. Decades of covert operations had carved him into stone. Yet tonight, something cracked within him. The image of Sierra collapsing on the clinic floor, her pleading eyes, the knowledge of what she had escaped from, it gnawed at him. His conscience, buried for years under orders and protocol, clawed its way back to the surface. As they descended toward the deeper part of the forest, Daniel's flashlight flickered across a faint smear of blood on the snow. "This way," he said, voice tight. They followed the trail until it led them to a rocky ridge. A narrow crevice near the ground glowed faintly with a soft warmth, breath, maybe movement. Daniel ducked down first. "Sierra?" he whispered. The sound that answered him wasn't a bark or whine. It was a soft, trembling cry, half pain, half plea. The small cavern inside was shielded from the wind by jutting stones. Daniel crawled in, feeling the cold rock scrape his palms, and there she was. Sierra, the exhausted German shepherd, lay curled against the wall of the cavern. Her sable coat was soaked with melting snow. Her sides heaved with shallow, rapid breaths. Her eyes, normally a warm golden hue, were dull from pain yet burned with raw maternal instinct. The moment Sierra saw Daniel, a flicker of relief crossed her features. Then another contraction racked her body, forcing her, head down as a low growl of agony escaped her throat. Emily scrambled inside behind Daniel, her knees slipping in the snow. The moment she reached Sierra's side, her breath caught. "Daniel, she's in full labor. Oh God, she's starting." Daniel swallowed hard, unable to look away as Sierra's body tensed again, pushing through impossible pain. The first small, silver-gray puppy emerged, fragile, barely the size of Emily's palm, its thin coat shimmering strangely in the dim light. It wasn't crying. It made a soft clicking sound instead, unfamiliar and unnerving. But it was alive. Emily carefully wiped it clean with a towel, her hands trembling, then placed it gently beside Sierra's muzzle. Sierra sniffed her newborn weakly, eyes softening despite her exhaustion. The moment lasted only seconds before another contraction gripped her, forcing a sharp cry from her throat. Daniel felt his chest tighten so painfully he had to steady himself on the cave wall. "She can't do this alone," he muttered. "She's too weak." "She doesn't have a choice," Emily replied, voice choked. "Nature isn't giving her time." Behind them, the cave entrance darkened as Warren Hale appeared, snow dusting his hair, his breath heavy. He paused at the opening, flashlight raised, his blue eyes widening as he took in the scene. The second puppy arrived, even smaller than the first. Emily caught it, cleaned it, placed it beside Sierra. Hale stood frozen, the beam of his flashlight shaking slightly. It was the first time Daniel had ever seen fear on the man's face. Not fear of danger, but fear of the consequences of humanity's cruelty. Hale finally stepped farther in, his tall frame lowering slightly as if entering a sacred space. He raised one hand, fingers spread in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said to Sierra, his voice unsteady but sincere. "I swear." Sierra lifted her head, panting, trembling. Her tired eyes met Hale's. For a moment, the storm outside faded, the world holding its breath around them. In that silent exchange, there was no government project, no mission, no protocol, only a mother begging for mercy. Hale's stern expression broke. Just a fraction, just enough, but enough to shatter him, enough to make him question everything he had ever obeyed. Sierra lowered her head again as another contraction tore through her body. Hale stared, stunned into stillness, as the third tiny life arrived into the world. The moment carved itself into him, deeper than any order he had ever followed. The wind howled through the mouth of the cavern like an ancient creature determined to reclaim everything hiding inside it. Snow drifted in thin ribbons across the rocky floor, gathering at the feet of Agent Warren Hale, who stood half silhouetted at the entrance. Tall, rigid, but trembling in a way he tried desperately to hide. His long coat was stiff with ice, and the strands of gray at his temples glistened with melting flakes. Hale reached for his radio with a hand that was steady only on the surface. The tremor in his grip betrayed the storm unraveling inside him. His thumb pressed the button. "This is Agent Warren Hale," he said, voice grainy with fatigue and conflict. "I'm tracking subject E9. The signal is fading. I may lose visual." His eyes flicked toward Sierra, curled around her growing cluster of newborn pups. Even in the dim light, Hale saw her lift her head and stare at him. Those golden eyes dull from pain, but still fierce with instinct. That look pierced him deeper than the cold ever could. He lowered the radio, and after a moment that felt dangerously fragile, he switched it off. A sharp click echoed in the cramped cave, louder than any thunderclap. Dr. Emily Carter, kneeling beside Sierra with blood on her gloves and her hair matted to her cheeks, turned sharply toward him. Emily, normally brave and outspoken, now looked terrified, not of Hale, but of what his silence meant. "Warren, what are you doing?" she whispered. Her voice cracked around the edges, the storm inside her fighting its own battle. She wasn't a soldier. She wasn't built for life or death standoffs and blizzards, but in this moment, she was standing her ground. Hale's jaw clenched so hard, the muscles twitched. He had a strong, angular face made harsher by a lifetime of burden. Missions he regretted, orders he obeyed too late to undo. The lines around his eyes were carved by guilt more than age. "I can't take her," he said. "Not after the way she looked at me." The admission left him like a confession he'd never intended to speak aloud. Officer Daniel Brooks, who had been wrapping the newborn pups in thin blankets, paused mid-movement. Snow clung to his shoulders, his breath rising in heavy clouds. Daniel didn't speak immediately. He just watched Hale with the quiet, penetrating stare of a man who knew exactly what it meant to feel split open by grief. He had buried a daughter. He understood impossible choices. "You don't have to explain," Daniel finally said, voice low but certain. "I saw it too." And he had. The moment Sierra's eyes met Hale's, raw, pleading, refusing to surrender, it was as if the air in the cavern had shifted. In that instant, none of them were defined by their uniforms or titles. They were three human beings kneeling beside a mother, fighting for 50 fragile lives the world shouldn't have allowed her to carry. Hale exhaled slowly, a sound closer to a broken man than a government agent. "She shouldn't even be alive," he murmured. "None of them should. But she fought her way out, and she trusted me, or maybe she begged me." His voice trailed off as he watched Sierra lick one of the weak puppies, nudging it closer to her warmth, even though every movement sent a shiver of pain through her body. Emily gently lifted the smallest pup and wrapped it in Daniel's jacket. Her hands were freezing, but her expression was warm with something like devotion. "She's done everything she can," Emily whispered. "It's our turn." Daniel nodded and reached under Sierra, carefully supporting her trembling body. She whimpered, but did not resist. She recognized them now, not as threats, but as the only beings who had chosen to stand between her and death. "Easy, girl. We're getting you out of here," Daniel murmured, voice thick with compassion. Sierra pressed her head weakly against his wrist. Hale watched the scene unfold, each movement digging deeper into his chest. It would be so easy to step back, return to his vehicle, call in the coordinates, and let others handle the aftermath. That was what was expected of him: obedience, detachment, execution. But as he watched Daniel lift Sierra and Emily cradle her new litter with trembling care, something inside him finally snapped loose from the chains that had held it for years. He stepped forward silently, surprising both of them, and reached out as if asking permission. "Let me help carry the pups," he said, voice low. Emily hesitated, still uncertain what version of Hale she was facing, the man shaped by orders or the man awakened by a mother's plea. But Sierra lifted her tired gaze toward him again and didn't flinch. That was enough. Emily placed 3 wrapped pups carefully into Hale's arms. He held them with an unexpected gentleness, cradling them against his chest, shielding them from the wind with his coat. "Thank you," Daniel said quietly. Hale didn't respond. Words would only cheapen what he had already decided. Together, the 3 of them stepped out of the cavern into the razor-sharp cold. Snow lashed their faces. The wind threatened to steal their breath. But they moved as one. Daniel leading with Sierra in his arms, Emily close behind with the medical bag and several pups, and Hale following silently, carrying life instead of death. He no longer walked like a pursuer. He walked like a guardian who had just betrayed the only world he knew. And Sierra, nestled against Daniel's chest, closed her eyes, not in fear, but in the fragile beginning of safety. Hale followed them into the storm, wordless, changed, and no longer chasing. The abandoned farm at Willow Creek lay wrapped in winter's quiet embrace, its wooden fences half buried beneath snowdrifts and its wide pastures shimmering pale under the fading sun. The old barn, weathered red paint peeling like memories long forgotten, stood stoically against the cold. For years, no human voice had echoed inside it. Tonight, it became a sanctuary. Officer Daniel Brooks, exhausted but steeled by purpose, pushed open the creaking barn door with his shoulder. The warm scent of hay and old cedar rose to greet him. Daniel's tall, broad frame, usually a symbol of authority, seemed softer now in the firelight. His brown eyes, always carrying the shadow of the daughter he'd lost, softened as he watched Sierra being settled onto a thick bed of straw. At that moment, he felt something new, something close to hope. Inside the barn, Dr. Emily Carter knelt beside Sierra, her slender figure bent forward with tender precision. Her long, copper-brown hair was damp with melted snow, sticking to her freckled cheeks as she worked through the night. Emily's hands moved gently but decisively as she checked the breathing of each newborn. The puppies, tiny silver-gray bodies barely larger than her palms, squirmed weakly under the soft blankets she had prepared. Her heart tightened every time one let out the faintest squeak. Emily had always been compassionate, but tonight her devotion carried a deeper weight. The overwhelming realization that these 50 newborns existed only because she and Daniel had broken every rule to choose kindness. Sierra lay curled in the nest of straw, her sable coat illuminated by the orange glow of the fire Daniel had built in the old iron stove. Her breathing was shallow but calmer now, and her golden eyes were fixed on her puppies with fierce devotion. Her body trembled with exhaustion, but she nosed each tiny pup closer to her warmth. She was barely alive herself, yet she gave every remaining ounce of strength to them. At the entrance of the barn, half in shadows, Agent Warren Hale stood motionless. Snow dusted the shoulders of his long, dark coat, and wind pressed against his back as if trying to pull him away. The tall, angular man looked carved from stone, but his steel blue eyes betrayed something fragile beneath the hard exterior. Regret, conflict, a lifetime of orders that weighed heavier than the coat he wore. Hale's face, with its sharp jawline and weathered lines etched by years in covert service, remained still. But inside, a storm raged wilder than the one outside. He had captured animals before, seized lab runaways, followed protocols without blinking. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for this sight. A mother broken by pain, surrounded by children she'd fought fate to protect. Daniel approached slowly, brushing snow from his arms. He paused beside Hale. The firelight cast long shadows across both men's faces. "What will you tell them?" Daniel asked quietly. Hale didn't answer immediately. His breath came out as a misty plume, fading into the cold air like a ghost of all the things he wished he could forget. Emily looked up from the straw, her eyes red from exhaustion. "Warren," she whispered, "your career, everything you built, they'll question you. They'll investigate." Hale finally spoke, his voice low, steady, and strangely peaceful. "I'll tell them the storm worsened, that the subject, E9 to 47B, broke free, slipped down the ravine. The body was lost in the river." He swallowed hard. "Case closed." Emily's eyes filled instantly with tears. She wasn't the dramatic type. She rarely cried. Tonight, she couldn't hold it back. "Are you sure?" Her voice trembled. "You'll lose everything." Hale gave a faint, tired smile, more a crack in his armor than a smile. "There are things worth losing," he murmured, "if it means they live." Sierra shifted at the sound of his voice, lifting her head weakly. Her eyes found Hale in the shadows. The tired, golden irises shimmered with something he hadn't expected, gratitude. Or was it forgiveness? Hale stepped closer, kneeling with a stiffness that betrayed injuries from old missions long buried in classified files. He reached out one gloved hand and touched Sierra lightly between the ears. His voice softened to almost a whisper. "Live, little one," he said. "Keep them hidden. Don't let anyone find them." Sierra blinked slowly, leaning just slightly into his touch. It lasted only a heartbeat, but it was enough. Enough to unmake the soldier he used to be. Hale rose, turning toward the barn door. The cold air flooded in as he stepped outside, snow swirling around his tall frame. With each step, he left a deep footprint in the untouched snow, a trail leading back toward the world he no longer belonged to. As he disappeared into the winter, Daniel watched with a solemn respect. Emily wiped her tears and returned to Sierra, checking another pup. Sierra settled her head onto the straw, calm for the first time in days. She knew she was safe. Months later, the government never found her trail. E9's file was sealed indefinitely. Daniel resigned from the force. Emily moved into the farmhouse. Together, they rebuilt the abandoned property, new fences, warm shelters, fields restored. On the front gate, Daniel carved a wooden sign, Haven Ridge Sanctuary, home of the rescued souls. One summer morning, Daniel stepped outside, watching Sierra bound across the meadow with her 50 growing pups trailing behind her like a silver tide. And for the first time in years, he smiled, a warm, full smile untouched by grief. Some people do the right thing even when no one will ever know. There are moments in life when we witness something that feels far greater than chance, far deeper than coincidence. Sierra's story, her courage, her impossible survival, and the people who chose compassion over fear reminds us that miracles still walk quietly among us. Some come wrapped in fur, some come as a whisper in a dark night, and some arrive as a sudden strength in a tired heart, the kind only God can give. In our everyday lives, we often carry burdens no one else sees, silent battles, quiet prayers, fears we hide, and hopes we dare not speak aloud. But stories like this remind us that God never stops working in the background. He protects the lost, He lifts the broken, and sometimes He sends the right people at the right moment, just like Daniel, Emily, and even Hale, to remind us that His light still finds its way through the storm. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to share it so others may feel the same warmth. Leave a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from and how God has shown you kindness in unexpected ways. And if you believe that every creature, every soul, and every second chance is a blessing from above, make sure to subscribe for more stories that honor faith, love, and the quiet miracles around us. May the Lord bless you, keep you, and watch over your home tonight. May He guide your steps, soften your burdens, and fill your heart with peace. And may His grace surround everyone who watches this story. God bless you, God bless your family, and God bless every soul who still believes in kindness.